really drew me to this organization. I think now more than ever, we need a place like this to have those types of conversations and to come together as not only a city, but so that's what really drew me to this organization. I look forward to meeting all of you and humbled to be here today. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Welcome to our club. Excited to have you and excited for your future contributions to our effort. Next, I'm going to ask Jessie Schmidt to come forward with her inductee, Darren Anderson.
President Tony, fellow Rotarians, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Darren Anderson. Darren is the president of Big D Technologies, and he, for over 33 years, he's a graduate of Dakota State University, as well as Leadership Sioux Falls. He's an active member of Lutheran Social Services School-Based Mentor Program, and has been for 22 years. And gives local presentations on that, and be watching because he has a book coming out. Rotarians, Darren Anderson.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for inviting me to your club. My story basically starts when I was a senior in high school, which was about 10 years ago. And my brother asked me, he said, "What do you want to do with your life?" I said, "I want to be a farmer." That's all I knew. And he said, "Why don't you go into computers?" So I was highly impressionable. So I went into computers. Started at community college before it was Killian Community College. Got every certificate and diploma that they had because they weren't accredited at the time. And started in as a COBOL programmer on mainframes when I was 19 years old. Since then, I've got my associate's degree, I've gotten a double bachelor's from NAU, and I got a master's from Dakota State University. Along the way, I've done a lot of different things. Been heavily involved in chambers, and still do that with a lot of local chambers. I was the director of SCORE, where we helped new businesses. And, it's not so much, that, and this deals with the Rotary as well. It's giving back. Ever since that I was involved in any kind of business, I always tried to give back to the community. And that's what I feel that Rotary does, and that's why I want to be a part of this group. I've been a school-based mentor for this will be my 23rd year starting out, coming up. I started before LSS was involved. I've done a lot of different things, tried to give back, always give back to the community. I can't say enough about mentoring and I see a lot of guys in the room. They're always looking for men mentors. There's a lot of boys out there that need help. It only takes an hour a day. And I always say that will be the best hour that you spent of your whole week. Last year, we started a new company called Memorials First. My partner in crime, aka my girlfriend, her and I, we go out and we put on Christmas trees, Christmas flower memorials. We clean headstones, different things like that. And to prove that you never quit learning, next month, I will be going back to school for something that probably nobody will ever think of, but I'm going to try to be an auctioneer. And so we started a company called Big D Auctions. part of that, and we'll do online. So once again, thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Tony. And thank you to all of you. And I look forward to meeting everybody. Thank you.
Welcome, Darren. You definitely have a heart for the community. You're a mentor, future auctioneer, and it's great to have another Dakota State grad. So we're going to take a picture here quick, and then we'll continue on with our program. All right, once again, welcome, Darren and Aaron. I'll ask Kayla Eacham to come up to the podium while she's making her way. I do have a few guests from the Premier organization that I do want to introduce. Tasha Jurens, Lisa Gerner, and Sandra Wallace are here from the Premier organization, so wanted to welcome you as well. With that, I will turn it over to Kayla Eacham to introduce our junior Rotarian.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is an exciting day to welcome our junior Rotarians back. As Tony said, it's been since March of 2020. So if you're new to the club between March of 2020 and today, the Junior Rotarian program is to bring high school students into the club to learn about Rotary, get to meet all of you, and share a little bit about who they are and what they're interested in. So please get to know them. They have awesome stories, great things they are planning, and you will leave here very confident in the future of our workforce. So the first person that we are going to introduce for this school year is Caden Groen. Caden is a senior at Lincoln High School, and he's involved in cross country, track, National Honor Society, and the chess club. He's also involved with Collision. Many of you know what Collision is, that group in schools. And he works part-time at Forever New and is a ski instructor at Great Bear. He obviously enjoys skiing, listening to music, sports, all sorts of different things. He is looking at a higher institution for learning for next year, but hasn't picked one. So I know there's a lot of various groups that are going to fight for Caden later today, but he is hoping to go into financial management. So please help me welcome Caden Groen from Lincoln High School.
All right, thank you for having me. So in elementary school, my parents enrolled me in the Spanish immersion program. And from the start of kindergarten, I was taught completely in Spanish. This was one of the smartest decisions my parents have made because it not only let me learn and become fluent in another language, but it also introduced me to a multitude of new cultures at a young age. Being bilingual has allowed me to connect with people that are in our community and that sometimes get overlooked or don't receive the same amount of help. I've had the opportunity to tutor kids in Spanish and help them progress. I've also been able to step up when needed and offer assistance translating for an individual or simply making someone feel more welcome and comfortable by talking to them in their native language. Another important decision in my life was joining cross country in middle school and high school. Cross country is a sport that not only is physically taxing, but also tests the mental toughness and grit of everyone who competes. Each race is about how much you are willing to give and how far you are willing to go to reach your goal. During races, it's a constant struggle of willpower to continue at a pace that makes me feel like I'm about to drop. Many races have stretches that are completely desolate of spectators cheering, and as the race spreads out, only a few remain alongside you. The desire just to take the edge off the pace is more than a little tempting. Luckily for me, I have 3 coaches that are there that are helping hand tell me bridge the gap to my goals. A quick "you're looking good" or "you're in a great spot" can do wonders for my morale, and the classic scream is always a pump up. They shot times to help me pace and let me know I can go a little bit harder because they want me to reach to achieve the goals I have in mind. Without them, it would be easy to fall off and from the goal at hand. Without support and encouragement, it becomes nearly impossible to make progress. These two small examples have shown me that in life, I need to be there for others and offering support and encouragement no matter how big or small. It could be that extra boost someone needs to reach their goal they have set for themselves. Thank you.
Nice job, Caden. And I'll ask Vonnie, Mike, and Jeff to make their way to the stage. Excited for Caden as he looks towards next year. We talk about workforce having two languages is only going to benefit you as you enter not only college, but then eventually workforce. And workforce is a topic that we've been talking about in this community for much longer than the last 2 years. But that conversation has only accelerated. And we know that the challenges that are out there and the needs of where people work and how they access work continues to be a conversation in boardrooms throughout the community. So we wanted to have a forum here to talk about work, what that looks like in a changing and evolving community, and what our needs are going to be moving forward. So excited to have Vonnie here today to moderate part one of a two-part series. We're going to talk Futurecasting today with Mike Grigsby, no stranger to our stage, as well as Jeff Griffin, who is a fellow Rotarian and has been part of a number of programs. Mike Grigsby is our Director of Innovation and Technology at the City of Sioux Falls, and Jeff's role with the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber is President and CEO. So with that, help me in welcoming our panel for our conversation today on workforce.
As such, we thought it would be important to discuss both sides of it, both from a more 30,000 view of how we think about what's happening in terms of workforce in our business environment, and also what we think is happening on a more localized viewpoint, what happens inside of the organization. So we'll be doing this as a two-part series. Part of it will be happening now as we talk about it from a 30,000-foot perspective, and then we'll talk about it as well. Oh, I must be sitting on the thing, huh? All right. That's a me thing. So, appreciate your time. I didn't know the pack had a weight limit on it. Future reference for everyone. How do I avoid that? Yeah, you better check yours. That wasn't a shot. That wasn't a shot. I was just saying you should probably check it.
I wore a tie for you and everything.
I appreciate that. I'm pretty sure that the president of the chamber is required to wear a tie, but whatever.
Yeah, we'll cover that.
Well, as we were talking about, we want to think about this from a macro perspective, because when we hear the conversation about what's happening in terms of workforce and growth and things of that nature, we generally hear the conversation happen in really two ways. Either we are flattered by the validation of bigger entities wanting to participate and people wanting to come here and choose us, or we hear about kind of the scourge of growth in corporate, monstrosities coming in for our souls. But there's a much more nuanced kind of conversation to be had here in terms of how you grow gracefully. And so that's where I kind of want to start. So if you want to give us just your kind of 30,000 foot view of where we're at right now in terms of the growth as it pertains to business. And
Go ahead, Mike.
You want that? I'll jump in.
Well, I can answer that. I didn't want to
Go for it.
I'll let you got it. I mean, so you may have heard in the news a couple weeks ago, we announced the Ford Sioux Falls campaign was very successful. Yes. And it was a $15 million goal. It rose to 16.7 million. So between my partner over here, Bob Munt with the Sioux Falls Development Foundation and the Chamber, much of that work we went out to pitch to investors revolved around workforce and growing our workforce and this question of how fast can we grow and how can we sustain the growth. And the story that the Ford Sioux Falls campaign tells over now its 8th campaign is that Sioux Falls has responded to that over the years. So I don't know if it's ever been more challenging, but I can tell you this, there's not a city in this country that I'd trade places with right now. That's the honest to God's truth. As a Chamber of Commerce executive, I get to talk to cities across the country. And when they saw that $16.7 million, my phone was ringing off the hook by other entities and how you do it. And how Sioux Falls has done it is building the education system, building workforce trainings, and no, the solutions of tomorrow are going to be new ones. But when you have a cohesion of a community that's got their oars in the water from a variety of sectors, we're in a good spot to match that, match the goal. But be naive to think we do get phone calls, mostly Bob, from the current investors of well, how much is enough? How are we going to? What's going to happen to wages? What's going to happen to our employees? We have current employers offering bonuses to new employees, and then the existing employees asking, "What about our bonus?" So you have all that happening at once. But again, would you rather be in a community growing to meet those challenges, or one that's stagnant? I'll choose growing every time.
Yeah, for sure. I'd echo that same. I was in LA last week, meeting with a lot of city leaders from across the country, and I echo that, Jeff, is that I wouldn't trade places with any other city right now. To hear the things, the challenges that Sioux Falls, I would call it the positive challenges that Sioux Falls is having to deal with right now versus kind of the playing catch up that other cities are having to deal with, I wouldn't trade places with anyone. I think the other piece to this too, I don't know that there's any better time to understand that the world is both and not either or. That we have to look, you talked about two sides of the conversation. It's not one or the other of those conversations. Both of those conversations are going on right now, and we have to learn how to step into those very circumspectly, because the nuances within each side of those conversations, not only are they dealing with the issues that are big in the window for each one of those sides, but they don't understand the synergy, or may not understand the synergy of how those two sides play off of each other. And it's really, really important to understand, especially the rate of change that we're going to be seeing. World Economic Forum released earlier this year that talked about between now and 2025. So that's 4 years. Between now and 2025, there's going to be 82 million jobs that disappear in the United States. Those are jobs that are known jobs, known job descriptions, solving known problems. And those 82 in that same time period are going to be replaced by 97 million new jobs that are new job descriptions, new job titles, solving problems we may not even understand that we have right now. So it's not a one-for-one swap. Like the person over here that was in this job, as it disappears, doesn't necessarily translate to this new job over here. So how do we've already got a 12 million job delta between the two. How do we make those jumps between that? And those are real problems, real challenges that I think, getting the visibility into them now is, I don't want to say we're behind the curve, but we've got to make sure we got our running shoes on for sure.
That's interesting to me, especially from the perspective of technology and innovation, because one of the reasons why I'm growing challenged with the phrase workforce is that it almost frames the conversation in a way that there's just these beings that come work in our organizations, and then they like beam up to this place that houses them and keeps them and engages with them. And that's not reality. These are residents. These are citizens. These are people who are joining our community. And so how does that become more realistic and practical in terms of how it means for transportation, in terms of how it means for access, those type of things? One of the major parts of your history is working on smart cities. And I think people just think about innovation and technology in terms of, things that they can play on internet, that type of thing. We're not thinking about infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in kind of the gizmos and gadgetry of that, but we need to understand that those are facilitators of what that future is going to look like, what quality of life is going to look like. If we're not thinking about smart cities in terms of quality of life, of economic vibrancy, of workforce development, workforce housing, if we're not thinking about those things and we get hung up in kind of the ones and zeros of the technology, we've missed the boat entirely. So again, we have to understand, and I've said it before, and I don't want to take too much time on this, but I've said this before, it's like, technology is to smart cities what hammers is to house building, right? You don't get hung up on the hammers that you're buying and dive into that, but you absolutely have to have the hammers to build a house. And it's the same thing. We've got to understand what role the technology is playing, and we can't get it out of sequence, or certainly we can't get it out of priority. And the impacts of understanding technology disruption is we understand it, but I don't think we're really understanding the impact of this. And I want to just very quickly talk about, the digital divide, and when I talk about the digital literacy. So inside the city of Sioux Falls, we had an individual last year who was a 20 plus year employee of the city, who was promoted into a managerial position. That individual during that same 20-year time had never been required to utilize our HR systems, our emails, and all of our computerized and technology systems. Well, before that individual could step into their job to do it, we had to pull him offline for a little while and get him up to speed on how do you do these things? How do you use these systems? What's the language? What's the verbiage? All of that context. And so that's a digital divide. It's easy to think about socioeconomic impacts, but we don't think about the digital divide in our own house in terms like that. And you think about your own workforces, how that's impacting workflow, productivity, efficiencies, cost, and expenses. It really kind of gives you a different lens to look through.
Yeah. And Jeff, to your part, obviously with a growing workforce, changing dynamics, demographics, and things of that nature is a major function for you all being legislative representation and those type of things. This group is getting less and less monolithic.
Yes.
And the viewpoints are becoming more divergent than they ever have. I'm not saying that all the presidents before you had it fairly easy, because they didn't, but you seem to have some challenges that they didn't. Talk a little bit about that if you.
So the Chamber of Commerce, I mean, for 115 years in our community, has existed voluntarily with business leaders and businesses investing their dollars and time so that we can exist. And that's a tradition we hold very sacred. But we also know, membership organizations, if they become complacent, we see it in country clubs, we see it in Rotaries, we see it in these membership inputs for communities. We need to be relevant and want to be relevant. So our young professionals, with over 1,000 folks right now, if we have someone contact us and they want to know about entrepreneurship, well, I've got plenty of folks. We have our Startup Sioux Falls network to help plug them into. Young professionals, we've got a nonprofit community that's part of our chamber to make those connections. In terms of the changing demographics of our community, this is a tricky one. One of the easy goals the chamber could say is we need more minority-owned businesses to be members of the Chamber of Commerce. And that'd be great. But the reality right now is there's a Hispanic business leaders group and so forth. So I don't think it does, and I meet with them, and it's not about, hey, what can we do for you? It's also about what can they do for me? And we need to make sure. I don't think I'd be accomplishing much if we just harvest their group to all be members, of the Chamber of Commerce. We'd love for them to participate in what we're doing, but I don't think my first interaction with them should be showing up with a $400 invoice and come to a ribbon cutting and mixers and so forth. We'll get to that part because we have to focus on longer term goals and how immigrants and refugees and folks that haven't been in the traditional education system of our country, how they plug into the workforce. And $50,000 a year for some college tuitions might as well be on Neptune for some folks new to our country. Might be on Neptune for some of us, right? So we're going to need traditional education and so forth in our country, but we're also going to need points of entry for all people. I don't care the color, to find desirable. There's a real dignity in work, and I believe all of us want that as human beings. And when we get people plugged in the right direction, we see great success in them. But a Chamber of Commerce, to repeat myself, there's more than just Spanish-speaking groups I want to reach out to. There's how many languages spoken in Sioux Falls. I want to make sure we have inroads into the different groups so that we're all rowing in the same direction. And a good example of when that worked really well was the Spanish driver's test, where a statewide coalition was built amongst people to get that across the finish line. There'll be more opportunities like that. But what's very encouraging in my role is to have the universities all involved in the Chamber of Commerce, and the private schools and the public schools. We get all those perspectives to generate the solutions.
Yeah. So, as a part of that, as we're growing and developing, one of the interesting things is, particularly as we talk about workforce and a bunch of other things, everybody is having a bit of the same problem. right? And it's one thing when you are being challenged by failure of some sort. It's one thing when you're being challenged because there's something that you're doing wrong per se. But when you're winning and your challenge is not being able to take advantage of it, that hits a little bit different. Now, the benefit of everybody having the same problem is that people are motivated to change. As a person who leads in culture, do I think many of the organizations that are investing in culture right now would be doing it the same way if it wasn't the seller's market? No, I don't think so. That being said, though, everyone having the same problem at the same time does present some different challenges, meaning you can't help everybody. And not everybody is going to be able to navigate these challenges at the same time. How do we invite growth? How do we do those things without thrusting us back into a scarcity mindset because people are being challenged by that growth?
I think one of the first things is understand, yes, we're all dealing with the same problem, but we're all dealing with it in very, very different ways. Perfect example is take the city of Aurora, Illinois. So they are a city almost identical to us, same size, same makeup, same characteristics and everything, but they're 35 miles away from Chicago. So the different dynamics that squeeze or put pressure on them is very different than a community like Sioux Falls, which is the largest in the state. That's the only thing within a however many hour radius, right? And those dynamics, we have to understand what that means from a workforce accessibility, from a workforce readiness standpoint. And you know, as we look at, you know, take again Aurora, as you have, or as Chicago turns out its college graduates, they have the opportunity to stay within that radius, and so they get to hold on to that talent. When our college graduates, graduates get out of school, they have there's this pull to go somewhere else, to make their mark somewhere else. And how do we retain that talent here? How do we impress upon them that you don't have to go beyond the borders of here, or that there's enough opportunity here? And it's challenging. I mean, you know, I did not grow up in Sioux Falls, but I remember growing up in my small town. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get out of Dodge. And it was trying to understand what those dynamics are that would keep me there. That's super challenging, but it's something that we need to be having conversations with our school districts and other educational facilities.
You know what comes to mind with that time, and I've been here long enough. I know I never mentioned a jackrabbit without a coyote or vice versa. So, it's very. Well, I even messed that up. Sorry, I'm just an Ohio State guy. All I had to worry about was the whole state of Michigan. Now I've got wars within my state. The Ford Sioux Falls campaign, I'm not going to dwell on that, although I could. All six, so USF, Augustana, Southeast Technical College, South Dakota State University, Dakota State University, University of South Dakota, are all investors in that. That's phenomenal investment in the community for people educating our folks on different tiers, right? So when I hear President Dunn planning a Sioux Falls Day for his leadership and making that a priority, or Dean Venke, and we've started this Friday internship program with USD students coming to Sioux Falls. All those new talent, some of that's new talent to our state that come here for undergraduate, and we get an opportunity to meet with them and help them be part of something within the community. Because when this country's proven, workers have proven to be nomadic in our country, and will go where the work is and go where the quality of life is. And we have certain small windows of opportunity to sell that to people who want to be here and feel like they can be part of something great. Now, the competition for that, this is where the chamber guy, I don't want to say we stay out of it, because our members, we have 1,800 members all in competition for talent. And, people have their private strategies or, how they angle at talent. But there's really, in my view, nothing new. You can only do better. I mean, if you treat people with high respect and high honesty, my best boss, if you feel like me, you learned your best lessons from your best boss. I also learned some best lessons from my worst boss. But the one I'm thinking of, he always said, treat people with high respect and high honesty. And if you think of that, your best coach, your best boss, when that person told you something you didn't want to hear, but told it with you honestly and respectfully, you probably grew from that. And that's where there's not this, I don't think, there's this idea people want to go and work for a place where there's no rules and I just show up when I want to show up and all, the goodness of our human spirit will reach that productivity. That's fantastic. And it's great when it works, but people want opportunity to grow and they want it to be trusted and respected. I think one of our biggest challenges is not letting people fail and just our immediate response as a society. If somebody messes something up, how we can just, pile on that person. And I think the workplaces, people want to be able to take chances, and companies that are able to line that up for folks are going to be, in my view, most successful at recruiting the best talent.
Well, I was going to say, can I play off of that for just a second? Because I agree with you 1000%. The respect and the honesty side, we've got to do that. And if you think about your own organization as employers or as managers within your own organization, one of the things that has been pressed upon the workforce, I would say over the last 10 years, certainly over the last 5 years, is this rate of change. And there is a change fatigue that is happening and occurring within the existing workforce, not even the workforce we're trying to bring in. And having to learn that change, how to navigate that change on top of the 40-hour-a-week demand of your actual job is challenging and super challenging, especially if you're in a very competitive organization, and certainly if you are technology minded or using technology as a component and as a tool of your organization. Having those respectful, honest conversations with your existing workforce to say, we don't know what tomorrow is going to be. We're in this with you. We're committed with you. Those are huge investments that will reap tremendous dividends within the next 5 years. Now, that's not even a long-term play. That'll reap tremendous dividends in the next 5 years. And those are really challenging conversations to have, to talk about innovation when nobody knows. If I asked you to give definitions of innovation in this room, we'd have 30 different definitions minimum, right, of innovation. And so how do you have those really good conversations? I know this is something that the city, we're struggling with. Not just how do we have the conversation, where's the channel? Where's the channel that we have that conversation? And when do I not get tired of hearing another newsletter or email or WebEx or text or tweet or whatever else it is? And understanding and sifting through that is really, really, really necessary work. Again, it's investments paid now that will reap very quick dividends.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because when we think about the idea of content, of messaging, of the medium for that communication, which is something in terms of telling our story and those type of things we haven't been historically good at. This is an internal conversation we've been having over the last 2 years in our downtown Rotary, which is the idea of how do we engage in these conversations, the relevancy of being in the moment, where we might have planned presentations a year out in advance. We do it far closer because there's a relevancy, there's an immediacy to some of the things that are happening in our community that we want to be able to respond to, especially with the level of leadership that we have in this room. How do we bump this into the 21st century? I mean, because, a lot of folks are still getting newsletters and things of that nature. And with respect to to some of the audience that prefers that, that's going away. So how do we,
I must say, because I know I have an audience listening. So the Chamber News, print magazine, the ads I don't think I'm charging enough for the ads as quickly as they sell out. I get positive feedback on having a magazine that we can leave behind on an airport. So I don't want to throw entire print media under the bus here.
No, yeah.
Because it's part of it. And I hear from folks, we read it cover to cover, and they aren't all over 50 that read it.
I did not suggest any age.
You see, I need to, before I answer the question, the tie comment earlier, I was in line in front of Vaney at Josiah's a few Fridays ago, and I had jeans and a shirt on. Oh, thank you. I had a shirt on. I had a fashionable,
as you would expect,
a fashionable shirt. And Vaney said, "Oh, I didn't even recognize. I didn't expect the chamber president to have to be wearing such a cool shirt." So I had to wear a suit and tie so he could recognize me this morning.
I appreciate you stepping out there.
No, we do our very best with the social media and be present with that to find avenues to folks to communicate, whether they live here, whether they live somewhere else. And I know Terry and her team at Experience Sioux Falls do a wonderful job getting our message out to other media outlets, bordering state, and same with Bob Munt and his team. reaching the minority community, minority-owned business community has been a challenge for us, and that's more, I think, that's where the grassroots strength of a chamber of commerce comes in, because that's where it's hand-to-hand combat to make sure you're getting the message out to folks. But we're doing the very best we can, and I think quite successfully, our engagement on the online media and so forth. But most of that takes off because of our ambassadors, our diplomats, our young professional, having that huge volunteer base that helps spread the word and add credibility to what it is you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think there's also a very real, very palpable difference post-COVID versus pre-COVID. The way we engaged in some of these channels and utilized some of these tools, very, very different now. Well, everybody kind of before COVID, we kind of had our toe in the water, maybe trying out a couple different things, but now on the backside, after a year and a half of having to do this, we're looking at this very differently. What I would offer, or at least suggest that you communicate and have discussion with your teams, is talk about the term of channel fidelity, right? You may have a newsletter, you may have social media, you may have a website, you may have all these other channels, but understand what message do you want to drive through which channel, right? If the most crucial thing is only going to come out in the print material, you've got to make sure that you maintain the fidelity of that channel and don't kind of get distortion in there with other things. If you are in your business are using social media and that's how make sure you maintain the fidelity of that channel, because what happens is people they get bombarded by too much and they don't know, am I supposed to check it here? Was the update going to be over in Twitter, or was it going to be on the website, or was it going to be over here? Maintain and focus on channel fidelity, because that way you get kind of the stickiness of your messaging out there, and the quality will go a lot higher, be a lot higher.
But how do we stay on the front end of that, right? Because we still have a lot of folks, a lot of businesses. You know, I know a lot of business owners that don't know to log into their Facebook. That's troubling, right? Especially what's happening. And a lot of people are learning how to use these things. You know, when you talk about your YouTubes and all those things, they can take years to build, and there's nothing that really replicates it. When you have 250,000 subscribers of people who are going to listen to what you say every time you say something, that is a very unique power position to have, to be able to have that direct channel that isn't really replicated by many other things. But it takes a lot to build that. It takes being on the front edge of it. It takes creating programming that all doesn't have a straight line to the output. You know, it requires being entertaining in ways that we are not traditionally thought of being entertaining when it comes to the boilerplate table stakes of business and government. How do we, get into the front end of this thing so that we're leading it in that we are being more innovative?
I would say, and it sounds cliche, but you got to know your audience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you think about, Jeff, you were talking about the, your immigrant community, their understanding of what we would consider to be traditional channels, newsprint or print media or things like that, doesn't translate the same in that community as it would for a lot of us in this room. And I think I was actually going to make a comment earlier on something you said is, I think we dismiss, or at least we don't pay enough attention to the years of introduction that we've had and just repetitive understanding of just kind of the machinations of how business works. You go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you have a family, 2 cars, white picket fence. Like that has been ingrained in us for so long. We're a little bit dismissive of that. And then for anyone new coming in, whether it's a nuance for our community in Sioux Falls or it's a nuance to our country, the United States, we don't understand kind of the overhead that they have in trying to navigate that. What makes sense for us and for the large majority of the population, there's a segment that that joke fell flat, right? That really super important thing just fell flat because it just doesn't resonate the same way. And I think understanding, like I said, I don't want to sound cliche, but understanding your audience, you've got to know where they are. You got to be in tune with that.
Well, okay. So let's think about that when we talk about our audience externally, right? Because we're trying to get folks here theoretically. Okay. Mm-hmm. So for me is what is the pitch, right? It's a great place to live, no doubt about it. But when we think about it from a business perspective, there are clear and present incentives for businesses to come here, right? We have a very welcoming tax environment, from a low regulatory environment, all these other type of things that are check for a business. How does that relate in terms of the individual, in terms of the person saying, you know, because it's not just a matter of moving here because, you know, we want to hang out with you or play soccer with you. It is because we need you. What is the conversation? What's the pitch around that?
You mean to the someone seeking employment or someone moving their business?
To someone seeking the individual.
Yep. So this is back to the grassroots pieces of it. So we need, all right, if you have people that have moved here for safety reasons or quality of life that they heard from another immigrant and heard about, hey, it's a good place to live. That's why having Dr. Jane Stabem on my board of directors is helpful to us, because we can get deeper down into the lower grades. Things that jumped off the page for me when I heard, I think it was 85% positive on the vote for the new school. Was that the right number? When I heard that, I went home and I told Rosie, we're going for a second interview if they call me, because I'd never heard of such a thing. And I think that would resonate for some. You know, sometimes we kind of overcomplicate this. When I go to the nomadic history of our country, I wish we could bring coach loads of people here from a state like Illinois that's suffering, that they need work, and get them here and just flip of the switch, make that happen. But you don't, because you're leaving your dentist and your bank and everything you know behind. So we need to build those relationships. And I think our schools and our universities, I keep going back to that because I think they're a huge asset for us for that. I mean, the Build Dakota program, the ability for people to come here and get an education and be part of our state, those opportunities don't exist in every state. So it's beyond, plus, you know, we all talk about talent and the talent we need of businesses mostly represented in this room. We need some workers. And I know work transcends everything we do, but we need some folks that for some good jobs that exist in manufacturing and so forth here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And the attraction of those folks, I believe, occurs within the school systems and within like the Southeast Technical College and their contacts across the country. Those stories can radiate out. And, you know, we have some investment dollars to use to tell our story out and about, but it gets very granular to me because those things happen by relationships, and that's a lot to move the thousands of people we need to move here to work.
Well, as you talk about that, we need workers in that traditional sense of work in manufacturing and things of that nature. Does that individual exist? Is that individual being born today in a gig economy, in a remote economy? Not to mention the dynamics of someone being able to live here but work in San Francisco and make double what they would make here. Those type of things. These are things where people have the ultimate flexibility in terms of being able to work a little bit like this and a little bit like that. So with this new audience that is different, that is not the traditional work for 30 years, go watch type folks, what are the prospects there? What are we not seeing?
I don't know. I think to Jeff's point, I think we might overcomplicate that a little bit. I remember, you know, as I was going through high school and all the job prospects, I mean, they talked about you could be a doctor and a lawyer, and you could be go to NASA and be an engineer and all that. And it sounds great. And, you know, a percentage of my graduating class went on and did that. There was also a pretty sizable portion of the class that went to work at the local manufacturing place, right? There were jobs there that didn't have the aspirations or whatever. And I think I've said this before, is that technology now allows us to get so far look out on the horizon. We create a little paralysis for ourselves here. Like, how are we actually going to solve this problem when the market and the individual are going to solve that problem for us? They're going to do that automatically. I learned this morning that we have a new police academy class starting, and in that class we have 8 new recruits who are former police officers that have just moved to Sioux Falls because they want what's here. We didn't go snatch them up. We said, here's what Sioux Falls has to offer. They were very interested to come here. And so we have a ready workforce. They're already trained. The cost to get them on the streets is far less than having them go through the academy. They're ready to go right now, and they have a desire to be here, right? We didn't have to go drum up anything for them. We just said, here's who Sioux Falls is, and they were very ready to come do that. And I think, if we, you know, to the point Jeff made earlier about the workforce that we need, If we got all of that workforce tomorrow, we would hit a point of overwhelmment, right? Our housing isn't ready for it yet, and some of those things. So there is this notion of growing a little bit organically, but we've got to understand that we got to put our foot on the gas where we can in those moments. And just, quick plug on the city side. This is where we're looking at technology to try to facilitate some of that kind of ease, some of that transition, right? How do we make it easier for employers to get the permitting or to get the growth or to get those things? How do we, as the city, partner with the employer side to make that easier and to make, to facilitate some of that growth? How do we make it easier on the housing side? How do we make it easier on those, right? That's where we look at it. The data, is it possible, and this is a hypothetical, we're not set up this way, but is it possible to gather our tourism data from CVB and understand where people are coming from to come visit Sioux Falls, and then go advertise in those places to go, hey, remember this great place that you visited? We also got a job for you, right? People will self-select and they'll come here, and then we'll start to see that acceleration factor kick in.
You make a good point about having to do it kind of organically in parts. That said, you have people who may be feeling the pinch in one way or another now, that needs some movement now, whether it be in housing, whether it be in workforce, or any of those other type of things. What are some areas where we might have some blind spots? Because, what comes to mind for me is that we're in this phase where we have this hockey stick growth, everything's exciting, but we're also in this challenge where there's this thing of altruistic development, right? It is the idea of creating things before they are needed, because so many times we are figuring it out once it's upon us. What are some things that we're not seeing? What are some blind spot areas where we can stand to get prepared, where we need to put some investment, where we need to put some energy to make sure that we're prepared for when these things happen, so we're not always catching up?
I think what you're talking about there, I believe, exists with the think groups within our own businesses. And again, I feel like I'm doing a presentation for the universities, but also there that those seeds are planted with that group. And, I've got 10 different examples in my head of whether someone wants to be in financial management, entrepreneurship, where I'd plug them into to help with these think tanks or to develop that. But also, I want to go back to something you said before. I don't think we should not be dismissive of the person that wants to work 30 years in doing something and making something. I've got a transmission hose and some new tires that need replaced this week, and somebody's got to do that work, and I can't outsource it nor would I want to. But there's a good amount of research in folks working in the trades and building stuff about their mental health and accomplishment through the years and job satisfaction and so forth. That I think we're always going to need those workers, and to find people who can do that and take pride in that work over the long haul is going to be beneficial for all of us, so that we don't overthink what a community needs. Blind spots in the workplace. I'm always amazed at when folks get together with similar industries and so forth of what they come up with internally. But also, it's not really a blind spot, but one that needs solution is this housing dilemma and infrastructure dilemma we have. And here again, we've been working with growing a coalition, and we've hosted a couple of hearings here in Sioux Falls, and it's one of those things, when they're in session in Pierre, we're going to have some solutions presented before them, but there's got to be a balance of where government can help and where government gets in the way of helping, of the housing and platting fees and how properties are laid out and so forth. We're all going to have a role in that, and Sioux Falls' solution is going to be very different than the rest of the state. So we're trying to build those coalitions now in anticipation of the session in January.
I'd say on the education side, especially in our K-12, the way the curriculum is set up and the educators are already starting to move this direction. I think we just need to help them accelerate it and help put more support towards this. But if you think about the way that the education system is set up right now, they're not entirely equipping the kids coming out with a mindset of what the economy looks like today and what those skills are going to need in the next 10, 20, 15, years. And so, you know, we've talked about STEM. STEM has been around for a long time, but how do we make that part of the core curriculum, as opposed to that's a luxury item or a luxury course that kids can take, and understanding that teaching the critical thinking skills that kids are going to take. I mean, most of that college, you know, most of those kids coming out of school in the next several years, a healthy portion of that, they're going to be thought workers, right? They're going to be knowledge workers, right? Whereas going back to, you know, my time in high school, a lot of the bigger portion was you were going to work with your hands and so forth and be in the trades. Watching and understanding that shift, like I said, it's both and. Jeff makes a good point. It's both and. But can we make sure that those kids are getting those critical thinking skills in there to be able to sharpen that, you know, be ready for those jobs when they come up?
And that's part of the risk taking I was talking about earlier. I think there's a detriment in the solutions for our kids available in the palm of their hand and run to that too often. And I've got a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 16-year-old. I know they learn differently than me, and they fascinate me sometimes. But at other times, it's like, oh, who raised this child that doesn't know how to solve anything without Google? So,
Well, Google.
right. That critical thinking and putting yourself out there, and us as human beings being open for debate with civility and so forth, that all affects the workplace in my mind. And failure leads to growth. And I want to make sure we preserve an environment where that happens.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, there's much more to this conversation. We hope you will join us next week as we talk a little bit more internally in terms of what organizations can do. As we say, you can't hire who you want if you're busy hiring who you need. So how do you take care of the folks within your organization and make sure you prepare for the future? So look forward to that next week.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Vaney, Mike, and Jeff, for your time today. A conversation that will continue. As Vaney said, next week, as we look internally, important conversations for us to have. As Vaney and Mike and Jeff shared, these are conversations we're having internally and challenges that we're facing as a community. So we look forward to having you back next week. With that, Rotary is adjourned.
I'll wear my pack on the outside next time.
Yeah, man.
Now we know.